Behind the bright lights of Hollywood lives a man the world knows. And yet, despite it all, he became one of the most humble and beloved figures in Hollywood. This is not just the story of an actor. It is the story of grief and resilience, of brokenness and humanity. It is the story of a man who was defeated by life, but never defeated in spirit. In this documentary, we will uncover the real journey of Keanu Reeves. From his childhood in Beirut, to his rise as a global superstar in Hollywood. From the darkest tragedies that shaped his soul, to the light of kindness that made him a legend. Keanu Reeves is more than a movie star. He is proof that pain can be turned into compassion. That even in the face of unbearable loss, one can still choose to be kind. So let us begin this journey. A journey through a life where every chapter held a tragedy, and yet, after every tragedy, a new hope was born. Keanu Charles Reeves was born on September 2, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon. The city, vibrant yet fragile, carried its own history of conflict. But within the walls of a small hospital, a child entered the world whose life would one day inspire millions. His mother, Patricia, was an English woman, a performer, a costume designer, a dreamer in her own way. His father, Samuel, was a man of Hawaiian and Chinese descent, with a streak of rebellion that ran too deep. But their love story did not last. When Keanu was just 3 years old, his father walked out. For a child, the absence of a father is a wound that never truly heals. Keanu once said in an interview that he barely remembers his father, and the memories he does have are filled with distance, not closeness. The young boy was left with his mother and a broken sense of family. Patricia did her best to give her son a normal life, but life was far from stable. She remarried more than once. Each marriage brought change, new men entering and leaving Keanu's world. And with each change came a new city, a new school, and a new attempt to adjust. From Lebanon, the family moved to Sydney, then to New York, and finally settled in Toronto, Canada. But even in this so-called new home, Keanu was never truly settled. As a child, Keanu was different. He was curious, kind, and gentle, but he struggled in ways most children did not. He had dyslexia, a learning disorder that made reading and schoolwork painfully difficult. While other children learned to read fluently, Keanu would stumble, mix letters, and lose track of words. Teachers sometimes thought he wasn't trying hard enough. But the truth was, he was fighting an invisible battle every single day. School became less about learning and more about survival. He was moved from one school to another, never staying in one place for long. In fact, by the time he was a teenager, he had attended 4 different high schools. And in the end, he never graduated. But Keanu had something stronger than grades. He had imagination. And he had resilience. During his teenage years, one passion gave him purpose: ice hockey. On the rink, he was fast, strong, and fearless. His friends even gave him the nickname The Wall, because as a goalie, nothing got past him. For a while, hockey wasn't just a sport, it was his dream. He wanted to play professionally, maybe even for the Canadian national team. But fate had other plans. An injury cut short his hopes of becoming a professional hockey player. For many young men, that would have been the end of their dreams. But for Keanu, it was the beginning of something else. In school, even though academics were a challenge, Keanu found himself drawn to the arts, to theater, to performance, to the world of storytelling. Standing on a stage, memorizing lines, becoming someone else for a brief moment, it gave him freedom. On stage, his dyslexia didn't matter. His broken family didn't matter. He could be anyone. Slowly, acting became his new dream. But dreams don't come easy, especially for a boy from a fractured home with no father, no diploma, and no real direction. At home, life wasn't easy either. Keanu's relationship with his stepfathers was complicated, and eventually he learned not to rely on anyone but himself. His bond with his younger sister, Kim, however, was deep. She would later face her own battle with illness, but in their younger days, the siblings found comfort in each other, holding on through the chaos of their unstable household. Imagine a teenager, tall, shy, and awkward, moving through life without a clear path. Most people around him didn't see a future. But Keanu had something special, a quiet determination. A belief that even if life kept moving him from place to place, he would find a way to stand firm. He took part-time jobs, worked as a stagehand at local theaters, and kept auditioning for small roles. There were rejections, there were doubts, but there was also a spark. Toronto became the city where that spark slowly grew. Here, Keanu began to find his voice as an actor. Not in classrooms, not in textbooks, but on stage, in rehearsals, in auditions that gave him nothing but experience and resilience. Keanu Reeves' childhood was far from the glamorous beginnings of a Hollywood star. It was marked by instability, struggle, and pain. A missing father. The constant shuffle of schools and cities. The frustration of dyslexia. The heartbreak of letting go of his first dream, hockey. And yet, through all this, he was being shaped. Shaped into a man who would one day understand the meaning of struggle. Shaped into an actor who could bring raw emotion to the screen because he had lived it in real life. Shaped into a soul who would carry pain, but never let it harden him. This was Keanu Reeves before the fame. A boy lost in the shuffle of the world, but quietly preparing to find his place in it. Closing narration. Keanu once said in an interview, "Grief changes shape, but it never ends." Perhaps his understanding of grief began right here in his childhood. With every loss, with every challenge, he was learning lessons that no classroom could ever teach. And those lessons would carry him into the next chapter of his life. The chapter where the struggling boy from Toronto would take his first real steps into the world of acting. Keanu Reeves was never meant to follow a straight road. Life had already taught him that his path would twist and turn. But sometimes, the most broken roads lead to the most extraordinary destinations. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, while his classmates were dreaming of college or jobs, Keanu's dream was something else. He wanted to perform. To escape into different worlds. To transform pain into art. It all began on small stages in Toronto. Community theater productions, tiny roles, hours spent rehearsing lines in front of mirrors. He wasn't polished. He wasn't even considered traditionally talented by some. But he had something few others possessed. Raw energy, sincerity, and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. At just 15, Keanu was already taking small acting gigs. He worked as a stagehand in theaters, moving sets, watching actors from the wings. He studied how they spoke, how they moved, how they became someone else. Every play was his classroom. Every performance, a lesson. He once admitted that his love for acting came not from fame or fortune, but from freedom. On stage, he was no longer the boy haunted by dyslexia. He was no longer the child of a broken home. He was whoever the role required him to be. Acting for Keanu was liberation. His mother, Patricia, supported his passion as much as she could. Through her connections in the entertainment industry, Keanu occasionally met people who gave him opportunities. But in the end, it wasn't family ties that carried him forward. It was persistence. He auditioned for every role he could find. Commercials, theater plays, student films, anything. Slowly, opportunities began to appear. A Coca-Cola commercial here. A theater production there. Bit parts in television shows. They weren't glamorous, but they were stepping stones. One of his earliest jobs was as a correspondent for a Canadian kids show called Going Great. It wasn't exactly Shakespeare, but it gave Keanu time in front of the camera, a chance to feel comfortable speaking to an audience. Each small role built his confidence, layer by layer. But behind the small breaks was the same restless soul. Keanu wanted more. He wasn't content being just another struggling actor in Toronto. His dreams stretched farther, across borders, all the way to Hollywood. In 1984, Keanu made a choice that would change his life. He decided to leave Toronto and head to Los Angeles. At just 20 years old, with little more than determination and a few connections, he set out for the city of dreams. Hollywood is not a kind place for outsiders. Thousands arrive with big dreams, and most leave with broken hearts. But Keanu was different. He was focused, disciplined, and unshakably determined. His first break came in small television movies and low-budget films. They weren't blockbusters, but they gave him a chance to prove himself. In 1986, he landed a role in Youngblood, a hockey film starring Rob Lowe and Patrick Swayze. It wasn't a lead role, but for Keanu, it was poetic. A film about hockey, the sport he once dreamed of playing professionally. The boy nicknamed The Wall had finally stepped into the world of cinema. The late 1980s marked the beginning of his rise. In 1989, Keanu starred in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The film was silly, quirky, and lighthearted, the complete opposite of the heaviness he carried in his personal life. But audiences loved it. Keanu's portrayal of the goofy, lovable Ted Logan made him a household name. Suddenly, the boy who struggled in school and stumbled through lines was being quoted by teenagers across America. But not everyone took him seriously. Critics often dismissed him as a one-dimensional actor, someone only good for goofy roles. Yet Keanu never let the criticism break him. He kept working, kept learning, kept fighting for the next opportunity. By the early 1990s, Keanu began to explore darker, more complex roles. In River's Edge, he played a troubled teenager. The film was gritty and unsettling, but it showed that Keanu had depth, that he could be more than just a comic figure. In Dangerous Liaisons, he shared the screen with established stars like Glenn Close and John Malkovich. Though his role was small, it gave him credibility in Hollywood circles. But perhaps his most important step forward was Point Break in 1991. Here he played Johnny Utah, an FBI agent who goes undercover with a group of surfers led by Patrick Swayze's character. The film was a cult hit, combining action, philosophy, and adrenaline. For the first time, audiences saw Keanu not just as the funny Ted Logan, but as a true action hero. Every step forward came with sacrifice. Keanu never chased the glamorous lifestyle of Hollywood. While other rising stars surrounded themselves with luxury, Keanu lived simply. He rode motorcycles, read philosophy, and avoided the spotlight whenever he could. He wasn't interested in being famous. He was interested in becoming better. And he was becoming better. From commercials to theater, from Youngblood to Bill and Ted, from cult dramas to action hits, Keanu was quietly building a career. But more than a career, he was building a foundation. A foundation strong enough to survive the storms that were coming. Because just as his professional life was rising, fate was preparing to test him in ways far harsher than any critic or director ever could. Keanu's journey as an actor had begun. But his journey as a man, through pain, loss, and resilience, was only just starting. Closing narration of Chapter 2. Keanu Reeves entered Hollywood not with the polish of a trained star, but with the raw determination of a fighter. He was underestimated, criticized, even laughed at. But he kept going. Step by step, role by role, he was proving himself. From the boy who struggled with dyslexia in school, to the actor audiences couldn't get enough of, Keanu had come a long way. Yet, the real challenges of his life, the heartbreaks that would define his character, were waiting just around the corner. And in the next chapter, we will see how this rising star transformed into one of Hollywood's most bankable action heroes, and how tragedy struck just when success was at its peak. Fame, success, stardom. By the late 1990s, Keanu Reeves had all of it. Speed had made him a star. The Matrix had made him an icon. From billboards to magazine covers, his face was everywhere. But behind the cameras, behind the red carpets, there was a man carrying pain that no amount of fame could heal. Because life, in its cruelest way, was about to take from Keanu the very things that mattered most. Keanu had always lived quietly. While other Hollywood stars chased parties, scandals, and headlines, he remained humble, almost invisible. He preferred books, motorcycles, and long walks over flashing lights. But in the late 1990s, something shifted. For the first time in many years, he had love. Her name was Jennifer Syme. She was an actress, a personal assistant, and someone who understood Keanu in a way few people did. They weren't flashy, they weren't loud, but they were deeply in love. And for Keanu, who had grown up surrounded by instability, Jennifer was peace. In 1999, the couple received news that changed their lives. They were going to have a child. Keanu was about to become a father. For a man who had grown up without one, this meant everything. Finally, he would give his child the love and presence he had always longed for. But fate can be merciless. On December 24, 1999, just weeks before the baby was due, tragedy struck. Their daughter, Ava Archer Syme Reeves, was stillborn. She never took a breath. For Keanu and Jennifer, the grief was unbearable. One moment they were preparing to welcome life. The next, they were facing unimaginable loss. Keanu rarely speaks about this time in his life, but those close to him said it broke him in ways words cannot capture. The joy of fatherhood had been ripped away before it even began. The tragedy strained their relationship. Keanu and Jennifer tried to heal together, but sometimes grief creates distance where love once lived. Eventually they parted ways, though the bond between them never truly disappeared. But fate wasn't finished with its cruelty. In April 2001, Jennifer Syme died in a car accident in Los Angeles. She was just 28 years old. When Keanu heard the news, he was shattered. In the span of 2 years, he had lost both his daughter and the woman he loved. Most people would have broken completely. Many would have turned to anger, to self-destruction. But Keanu, though devastated, carried his grief quietly. He did not lash out. He did not spiral into chaos. Instead, he withdrew. 4 years, Keanu kept his personal life hidden from the world. He buried himself in work, not as an escape but as a way to survive. He once said in an interview, "Grief changes shape, but it never ends." Those words were not poetry. They were his truth. And the losses didn't stop there. Keanu's younger sister, Kim Reeves, was diagnosed with leukemia in the 1990s. While filming The Matrix, while working on set every day, Keanu was also quietly caring for her. He spent hours at her side, supporting her through painful treatments. At one point he even sold his home so he could live closer to her. To the world he was Neo, the hero of humanity. But behind the scenes he was just a brother holding his sister's hand, praying she would survive. Kim eventually went into remission, but the experience changed Keanu forever. He donated millions of dollars to cancer research. In fact, for years he secretly funded charities without attaching his name. Only much later did people learn about his generosity. Think about this for a moment. A man who lost his father in childhood. A man who struggled with dyslexia and rejection. A man who lost his daughter before she was born. A man who lost the love of his life in a car crash. A man who nearly lost his sister to cancer. And yet, he never allowed bitterness to define him. Instead he chose kindness. He chose humility. He chose to keep giving even when life kept taking. Hollywood is full of celebrities who demand attention. But Keanu became the opposite. There are countless stories of him giving up his seat on the subway, talking to homeless people on the street, or quietly writing checks to those in need. On movie sets he was known to take pay cuts so other actors could be hired, or so that production crews could be paid more. When The Matrix became a global phenomenon, Keanu gave away tens of millions of dollars from his earnings to the special effects and costume teams. He believed they were the real heroes of the movie. This was not an act. It was who he was. Keanu's heartbreak shaped him into something rare, a man who truly understood pain and therefore truly understood compassion. He once said, "I don't want to flee from life. I know the beauty of it, but I also know the sadness of it." And perhaps that is why audiences connected to him so deeply. Because when Keanu Reeves plays a character, he isn't pretending. He is channeling the reality of his own journey, the grief, the struggle, the perseverance. By the early 2000s, while many stars crumbled under far less pressure, Keanu continued. He wasn't loud about his pain. He wasn't dramatic about his generosity. He simply carried on. And through his silence, through his humility, he became something Hollywood rarely produces. A star who was loved not just for his movies but for his humanity. Closing narration of Chapter 4. Keanu Reeves had faced more loss than most people could imagine. A lost father. A lost daughter. A lost love. A sister's illness. Yet through it all he remained standing. Scarred but not broken. Weary but still moving forward. This was not the story of a typical Hollywood hero. This was the story of a man who had learned again and again that suffering is part of life. And yet, despite it all, he continued to choose love, generosity, and resilience. In the next chapter we will see how this man, scarred by tragedy but defined by strength, found a second rise in Hollywood with the role that would once again change his career, John Wick. The early 2000s were a storm for Keanu Reeves. Loss, grief, and solitude followed him everywhere. Yet even as he carried the weight of heartbreak, he kept working. Films like The Matrix sequels, Constantine, and The Lake House proved he still had the star power. But by the late 2000s Hollywood began to whisper. Is Keanu Reeves finished? Has his time passed? He was no longer the fresh-faced action hero of Speed. No longer just Neo, the chosen one of The Matrix. He was older, quieter, and almost forgotten in a business obsessed with youth. But sometimes, legends are born not in the beginning, but in the comeback. In 2014, a film arrived that would rewrite Keanu Reeves' destiny. A film that few expected to succeed. A film called John Wick. The premise was deceptively simple. A retired hitman loses his wife to illness. After her death, the last gift she leaves him is a puppy, a symbol of hope, love, and healing. When ruthless men kill that puppy and steal his car, John Wick returns to the violent world he had left behind. It could have been just another action movie. But with Keanu Reeves in the lead, it became something else. Something iconic. Why? Because John Wick wasn't just a character. He was Keanu Reeves himself, a man who had lost love, who understood grief, who carried sorrow in silence. Every punch, every gunshot, every look in John Wick's eyes carried the weight of Keanu's own life. Audiences felt it. They didn't just see a character seeking vengeance. They saw a man broken by loss, fighting to keep hold of the last piece of love he had. It was raw. It was emotional. And it was real. But Keanu didn't just rely on emotion. He gave himself fully to the role, physically and mentally. Months of training in martial arts, firearms, and stunt driving turned him into one of the most believable action stars of his generation. While other actors used stunt doubles for most of their work, Keanu insisted on doing nearly 90% of his own stunts. He trained with Navy SEALs, practiced judo, jiu-jitsu, and tactical shooting until it became second nature. When audiences saw John Wick fighting, they weren't watching Hollywood tricks. They were watching Keanu, fully committed, fully authentic. The film exploded. Critics praised it. Fans turned it into a cult phenomenon. What was supposed to be a small action thriller became the beginning of a new franchise. But more importantly, it became Keanu Reeves' resurrection. The whispers of his career being over were silenced. Keanu was back, and perhaps stronger than ever. The success of John Wick spawned sequels, each one bigger than the last. John Wick, Chapter 2, John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum, and eventually Chapter 4 transformed the character into a global phenomenon. Audiences didn't just come for the action. They came for Keanu. For the quiet man who carried tragedy in his eyes. For the hero who fought not for glory but for love and memory. John Wick became a symbol. A symbol of resilience. A symbol of fighting back even when life has taken everything from you. And in many ways that was Keanu's own story. But success never changed him. On the sets of John Wick, Keanu was known for treating the crew like family. He memorized the names of stunt performers. He thanked them personally after each shoot. He gifted Harley-Davidson motorcycles to his stunt team as a gesture of gratitude. One stuntman once said, "Keanu Reeves is the only star who makes you feel like you're the star." The John Wick era also introduced Keanu to a new generation of fans. Young audiences who hadn't grown up with Speed or The Matrix now saw him as the ultimate action hero. His face returned to posters, memes, and internet culture. People began calling him the internet's boyfriend. Clips of him being humble in interviews, giving up his subway seat, or speaking about grief went viral. Suddenly, Keanu Reeves wasn't just a star. He was a legend. And through it all he remained the same. No ego. No arrogance. Just gratitude. He once said, "I don't care about money. I just want to enjoy life, be happy, and ride motorcycles." And that's exactly how he lived. Despite earning millions, he often wore simple clothes, ate at small diners, and avoided the Hollywood spotlight. For Keanu, success was never about luxury. It was about survival, art, and kindness. The John Wick films did more than revive his career. They reminded the world of the values he stood for. Dedication. Discipline. Heart. While other action stars relied on explosions and CGI, Keanu relied on authenticity. And in doing so, he redefined what it meant to be an action hero in the modern age. Closing narration of Chapter 5. The boy from Toronto who struggled with dyslexia. The young actor who was doubted and dismissed. The man who lost love, family, and nearly everything. That same man stood tall once again, reborn through John Wick. Keanu Reeves' story was no longer just about tragedy. It was about survival. It was about transformation. It was about proving that even after the darkest storms, light can return. And in the next chapter we'll see how Keanu's journey beyond the screen, his humility, his kindness, and his legacy, made him not just a star, but a symbol of hope in a world desperate for heroes. Keanu Reeves had conquered Hollywood twice. Once with Speed in The Matrix, and again with John Wick. But what made Keanu truly unforgettable was not just his movies. It was the man behind the screen. The man who, despite unimaginable success, remained humble, generous, and deeply human. Hollywood is often a world of egos. Stars demand luxury trailers, private jets, and constant attention. But Keanu Reeves was different. He lived with simplicity, moved with humility, and treated everyone, from producers to set workers, with equal respect. There is a famous story of Keanu sitting on a New York subway, dressed in simple clothes, quietly reading a book. When a woman entered carrying heavy bags, Keanu immediately stood and offered his seat. A fellow passenger filmed the moment, and within days the clip went viral. The internet couldn't believe it. A superstar who behaved like an ordinary, kind-hearted man. But this wasn't a performance. Keanu's humility wasn't an act for cameras. It was who he was. Crew members from his films often tell stories of him sharing meals with them, asking about their families, remembering their names. On the set of The Matrix, when he learned that the costume and effects teams weren't being paid fairly, he gave away tens of millions of his own salary to make sure they were compensated. Think about that. In an industry where actors fight for bigger paychecks, Keanu was giving his away. Generosity became his silent trademark. During the filming of John Wick, Chapter 3, he surprised his stunt team with brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycles, thanking them for their hard work. One stunt performer said, "He never forgets that you are the reason he looks good on screen. He thanks you every single day." Even beyond Hollywood, Keanu has given millions to children's hospitals and cancer research, much of it anonymously. For years, people didn't even know he had set up a private foundation for these causes. When asked about it, he simply said, I don't like to attach my name to it, I just let the foundation do what it does. But perhaps what made him most loved was his authenticity. In interviews, Keanu never pretends. He doesn't hide his grief, his sadness, or his struggles. When Stephen Colbert once asked him, "What do you think happens when we die?" Keanu paused, looked down, and replied softly, "I know that the ones who love us will miss us." It was a simple answer, but it carried a lifetime of pain and wisdom. And the world felt it. The internet began to embrace him in a way rarely seen for actors. Memes, tributes, and viral clips spread across social media. He became known as the internet's boyfriend. Why? Because people didn't just admire his movies, they trusted his soul. Photos of Keanu eating alone on a park bench went viral, and fans called him Sad Keanu. But instead of being offended, Keanu laughed it off. He embraced the meme, showing he was not only humble but also self-aware. One of the most famous viral moments came in 2019 at a gaming conference. Keanu walked onto the stage to present Cyberpunk 2077. When he told the audience, "You're breathtaking," someone shouted back, "No, you're breathtaking." Without missing a beat, Keanu pointed at the crowd and said, "You're all breathtaking." That one moment broke the internet. 3 simple words turned into a global trend. But more than that, it showed why people loved him, because he saw the audience, the fans, the people, not himself, as breathtaking. Despite his fame, Keanu Reeves never acted like he was above anyone. He waited in line like everyone else. He took photos with fans, often crouching slightly so he wouldn't tower over them. And in every picture, he respected personal boundaries, never putting his hands on women without consent, always maintaining kindness and dignity. These small gestures became part of his legend. Because in a world where power often corrupts, Keanu showed restraint, respect, and humanity. But humility did not mean weakness. Keanu remained fiercely dedicated to his craft. For John Wick 3, he trained 8 hours a day for months, perfecting judo, jiu-jitsu, and tactical shooting. For The Matrix 4, he once again transformed his body and mind for the role of Neo. Even in his 50s, Keanu Reeves was outworking actors half his age. Because for him, acting was not about money or fame, it was about discipline, storytelling, and art. Beyond acting, Keanu also pursued his passions quietly. He co-founded Arch Motorcycle Company, building custom high-performance motorcycles. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was his love, his escape from the noise of fame. He once said, "Riding motorcycles is my way of flying." This combination of humility, discipline, and authenticity made Keanu Reeves more than a Hollywood star. It made him a symbol. A reminder that kindness and success can exist together. That greatness doesn't have to come with arrogance. Closing narration of Chapter 6. Keanu Reeves is not just remembered for the characters he plays. He is remembered for the person he is. The man who gave away his earnings to lift others. The man who never forgot where he came from. The man who, despite carrying unimaginable grief, chose compassion over bitterness. In the next chapter we will see how this humble legend, loved across generations, built a legacy far beyond cinema. A legacy of resilience, generosity, and humanity that makes him one of the most admired figures in the world today. Keanu Reeves' story is not just about Hollywood. It is not just about blockbusters, fame, or fortune. It is about a man who carried unimaginable grief, yet chose kindness. A man who faced failure and doubt, yet never gave up. A man who proved that humility and greatness can walk hand in hand. This is his legacy. When people talk about Keanu Reeves, they do not only mention The Matrix or John Wick. They speak about the way he treats people. The way he sits with strangers. The way he remembers crew members' names. The way he gives quietly without seeking attention. In a world obsessed with wealth, Keanu Reeves reminds us that money means little if you have no heart. He once said, "Money is the last thing I think about. I could live on what I've already made for the next few centuries." And yet, instead of chasing luxury, he chases simplicity. Instead of showing off, he gives away. That is why his name carries more than celebrity, it carries trust. But Keanu's legacy is not just kindness. It is resilience. His life was filled with storms. A father who abandoned him. A childhood of instability. A struggle with dyslexia that made school a battlefield. The tragic loss of his best friend, River Phoenix. The death of his daughter. The heartbreak of losing his partner soon after. Most men would have collapsed under the weight of such pain. But Keanu endured. He turned his grief into strength. He carried his sorrow not as a chain but as fuel. That resilience became his superpower. It's why audiences believe him when he plays heroes like Neo or John Wick. Because behind the characters, there is a man who has truly fought his own battles. Keanu's impact also lies in what he represents to fans. To dreamers, he is proof that even an outsider can make it. To the broken-hearted, he is proof that you can survive loss. To the humble, he is proof that kindness is not weakness. To the world, he is proof that legends are not born in perfection, they are forged in struggle. Even his philosophy on life inspires millions. When asked once about happiness, Keanu replied, "Every struggle in your life has shaped you into the person you are today. Be thankful for the hard times, they can only make you stronger." These are not empty words. They are wisdom born from pain. And that is why they resonate. In Hollywood, where fame often fades, Keanu Reeves has built something more powerful. A legacy of love, humility, and perseverance. Young actors look up to him. Fans adore him across generations. The internet has crowned him as one of the most beloved stars of all time. But perhaps the greatest proof of his legacy lies in this simple fact. When people talk about Keanu Reeves, they do not just say, "He's a great actor." They say, "He's a good man." And in the end, that is far greater than any award, any box office number, or any headline. The story of Keanu Reeves is not a fairy tale. It is not a story of perfection. It is a story of struggle, pain, survival, and kindness. It is a story that reminds us that no matter how dark life becomes, there is always light. That no matter how broken you feel, you can rise again. That no matter how high you climb, humility will keep you human. Closing narration of Chapter 7, and the whole biography. From a young boy in Toronto who struggled with words, to a rising star who carried pain behind his smile, to a man who lost love but found strength, to a legend who gave the world not only unforgettable characters but unforgettable humanity. This is Keanu Reeves, an actor, a survivor, a symbol. His movies may entertain us, but his life inspires us, because in the end his greatest role was not Neo. It was not John Wick. It was himself. The humble, resilient, breathtaking man the world will never forget. Keanu Reeves' life has been nothing less than a living testament to human resilience. From the very first step he took into this world, he was met with challenges. A childhood scarred by abandonment, by the absence of his father, and by the instability of moving from one city to another. A youth marked by dyslexia that made learning hard, and a teenage dreamer who found solace in acting when everything else seemed to slip through his fingers. But even as the years passed, the storms in his life never ceased. He lost his closest friend, River Phoenix, in the most tragic way. He experienced the heartbreak of losing a child before birth, and then the crushing grief of losing the woman he loved, Jennifer Syme, not long after. If there was ever a man who had the right to be bitter, to be cold, to turn his back on the world, it was Keanu Reeves. And yet he didn't. Instead, Keanu chose a different path. He chose kindness. He chose humility. He chose to remain grounded when the whole world wanted to put him on a pedestal. He refused to let pain define him, even though it carved deep lines into his heart. He walked forward with quiet strength, showing the world that you can carry tragedy and still give love. That you can lose everything and still offer your hand to lift others up. This, perhaps, is what makes Keanu Reeves more than just a movie star. Because Hollywood is filled with actors. Many play heroes on the big screen. But very few live like heroes when the cameras are turned off. Keanu is one of those rare souls. The man behind the legend. For decades, he has given us unforgettable characters. Johnny Utah in Point Break, Jack Traven in Speed, Neo in The Matrix, John Wick in the action saga that redefined modern cinema. Each role iconic, each performance intense, each moment etched into cinematic history. But when the credits roll, when the theater lights come back on, what remains most inspiring is not the bullet dodging, not the stunts, not the action sequences. It's the man who quietly rides the subway with strangers. The man who donates millions of his paycheck to crew members, because he knows they are the backbone of every production. The man who buys motorcycles for his stunt team just to say, "Thank you." The man who, when faced with rumors about his wealth, simply smiles and says, "Money is the last thing I think about. I could live on what I've already made for the next few centuries." He lives simply, eats at diners like an ordinary man, and takes long walks alone. He is often photographed sitting on benches, not as a celebrity, but as a human being who enjoys the quiet company of the world. This humility is rare. It is what sets him apart. And it is what makes his story one of the greatest lessons of our time. Pain into power. When we look at Keanu Reeves, we don't just see an actor, we see a survivor. Someone who has endured heartbreak after heartbreak, but still rises to his feet. Someone who has been beaten down by life, but never broken. Someone who has chosen love, compassion, and forgiveness over hate and despair. That is why his performances feel different. Because behind every line of dialogue, behind every fight sequence, there is a reservoir of real pain. He doesn't just act, he becomes. When Neo chooses the red pill, when John Wick fights for his lost love, when characters fall and rise again, we see Keanu's own story mirrored. That's why the audience connects to him so deeply. Because they know his struggles are real. Keanu teaches us that pain can be turned into power. That scars can become symbols of strength. That grief, no matter how heavy, can be transformed into empathy for others. The legacy of Keanu Reeves. What will Keanu Reeves be remembered for? Yes, he will be remembered as Neo, the man who taught us to question reality. Yes, he will be remembered as John Wick, the unstoppable force of vengeance. Yes, he will be remembered as one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood history. But beyond the bright lights, Keanu Reeves' true legacy is far greater. He will be remembered as the man who showed the world that success is not measured by wealth, awards, or fame. Success is measured by how you treat people when no one is watching. His life is proof that no matter how many times you fall, you can rise again. That no matter how much the world takes from you, you can still give. That being kind costs nothing but means everything. This is Keanu Reeves' gift to the world. His legacy is not just in film reels. It is in the countless lives he has touched with his humility and kindness. A final lesson. At the end of the day, Keanu Reeves is not perfect. He is human. He feels loneliness. He feels sadness. He has been through more than most could bear. But his story reminds us of something very important. That no matter how broken we feel, we can still choose to live with grace. That no matter how dark the night, there will always be a dawn. That no matter how heavy the pain, there is always hope for healing. Keanu's life whispers to us, don't give up. Don't let the world harden you. Don't let tragedy define you. Be kind. Be humble. Be strong. And most of all, keep going. And maybe that is the greatest role he will ever play. Not Neo. Not John Wick. Not any character on screen. But himself. Closing words. As the credits of his life continue to roll, Keanu Reeves stands not only as a star of cinema, but as a beacon of humanity. He reminds us that strength is not in how many battles you win, but in how gently you treat those around you. That greatness is not in standing above others, but in standing with them. His journey is not just a story, it is an inspiration. His pain is not just tragedy, it is a lesson. His kindness is not just a choice, it is his legacy. So when we think of Keanu Reeves, we do not just think of an actor. We think of a survivor, a warrior, a humble soul. A man who, despite everything, continues to shine light into the world. And perhaps, that is what it truly means to be a legend.